Hey everybody, Edo here, and as we come to the end of 2017, I wanted to do a couple videos. This is the first. This first one is a look at the industry, just different trends and things going on that I've observed. Now, normally, I haven't felt like somebody who should be doing this type of video. I don't feel, in past years that I was as connected into the industry and had the kind of perspective you'd want to have to give perspective. I also am not deep into research and investigation and the kind of detailed work I like to see when somebody does this kind of video. At the same time, over this last year, through Pencil First Games, through the League of Game Maker videos I've been doing, through interviews, through meeting, I do feel like I have perspective and I have the ability to contribute to the conversation. So while I still think the type of video I enjoy most of this nature is one with deep research, insights, and information, I'm going to try to give my observations and opinions and just have a conversation. Certainly, whether this is a post on Facebook or a YouTube video, wherever, I welcome everyone's comments and thoughts. And, it's a wonderful time to be in games and things are dynamic and changing, and that's super awesome. And so that's great. The second video, which I don't know if I'm going to release them at the same time or within a week of each other, is going to be specifically a look at Pencil First Games in 2017, and a lot of the cool stuff Pencil First Games is doing in 2018. I don't think enough companies do that. There are previews and things going on, but why not talk about what you're doing? That's sort of what you do these days. But let's jump into this video and talk about the game industry. So as I said, what an awesome time for board games, right? The industry's booming, the audience is booming, creativity and the accessibility of game creation is booming, and it's in the midst of this huge disruptive period in board games, but really the retail industry in general, online, and distributed teams, and all the things that technology right now is disrupting. I'm going to avoid all of the not all of it, but there's a lot of that society's being impacted by all this. Adults are being impacted, children are being impacted. There's a lot going on. One of the really great things, and I think, is that board games has been a place, part of, I think, its growth can be attributed to some degree to a desire from people to interact and be with people, as opposed to just being online, and I think that's a good thing. So on the game side, obviously, Kickstarter and new publishers are in force. I was just watching the top 10 games from Tom Vassell and the Dice Tower, and it was really interesting because Tom was pretty negative on Kickstarter games for a long time, but his top 3 games were all Kickstarter games. If people like to watch the videos, I'm not going to mention them, but that's a pretty big deal. Whether or not you like the Dice Tower, it's still a pretty big deal, and you can see the impact of that in the industry. But from a game trends, the things that have been really awesome, many of which actually were in that video, but I agree with, is one, you're getting really high production value and colorful and bright abstract games, right? There are games like Talk, which are still very traditional in their presentation and look, but then games like Santorini, Dragon Castle, Azul are abstract games with really wonderful components and tiles and color. Santorini pushing it the first with the character design and theme. It's really showing that you can put a lot of love into an abstract game and make it something memorable and exciting and awesome. Abstracts aren't just this category for people who really like just, themeless games, and that's super awesome, and I think it's going to continue because the entire industry is leveling up right now. Another awesome trend that I've been enjoying has been the Exit series, right? There's Escape the Room, Exit the Game, Unlock, Time Stories, whatever, all these different ones that have really embraced puzzle, single consumption. Unlock tries to make it something you can do, but games, and they're great. They're great fun. They're really because of the way they're puzzled, because of the way they're often cooperative or almost always cooperative, they're great at bringing people together. And you can play that type of game really easily with people who aren't into games or, you know, don't have as much experience, because really you're just working on problems together. There have been some awesome Kickstarters for really elaborate ones, and I've seen episodic ones coming through and things are going to get in the mail. And that AR, you know, there was a period about 3 or 4 years ago where there's a bunch of these sort of AR in the world experiences before Pokemon Go, right? Where you like go on a zombie hunt in New York City and all these different things. And you're seeing some of those elements being pulled into these experiences. If you haven't been to an escape room IRL, those are booming as well in the United States. That industry is growing, and those are incredible fun as well. So just really crafted, creative experiences with tons of puzzle. I haven't done the review yet, but Unlock has really stepped it up in this next season. This one up here, the Nautilus Traps, is really starting to pull in the theme and the experience and being in the moment. Like, a lot of those games are just sort of puzzles for puzzle's sake, but the good, great ones are starting to really be these narrative adventures with puzzles. And the more they're pushing that, or some of them are historic or thematic, where like in San Francisco, there's one where you're sort of like, you know, it's sort of like in an evening room, but it's, you know, speakeasy and all the stuff's going on. So these really sort of transformative, transportative, that's not really a word, but things that transport you into a time period, into an event, into something, and give you this wonderful experience, and it's great. So that sort of ties to another major trend, which is narrative games, right? Games that have really great story and adventure, you know, Seventh Continent, Near and Far, Gloomhaven, lots, this will tease into Legacy a little bit, but lots of games where you have not only a storyline, but a play experience that's adventure, engaging, progressive, changing, that is extremely powerful and fun, right? Some are more storytelling, role-playing, or role-playing light. Some are just more mechanical. Charterstone's a great Legacy example that changes and grows, but isn't as narrative as, say, Pandemic. But all of these things are really bringing story and fiction to the forefront, and this is an area I see exploding in the coming years, both in terms of how elaborate the fiction is, the quality of the writing, the quality of the narratives. It's really going to be fantastic. And, you know, you have this interesting space in video games where you have EA coming out and saying, you know what? Single-player games are dead. It's all multiplayer, which is ridiculous, but you still have fantastic single-player narrative experiences, in particular on iOS and mobile, but in big games as well. There's just so much storytelling, so many characters and personas and perspectives, and just this explosion. And a lot of it's because it's becoming so, not easy, but more and more mediums are coming in, and more creative people with different perspectives and different ideas of what a story is and different ideas of who should be who creating, and it's fantastic. The last area I want to call out is the growing legacy space. And for me, right, there's Pandemic, which is sort of the flag bearer of it. Obviously, I'm forgetting the ship one, which was the not Pandemic. But you have Charterstone, and you have all these games that are coming out and pushing the envelope in what a game experience can and should be. One of the things I really like about it is it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be something that's expensive. I've been really impressed and happy with little elements that start doing it. And that's what I'm probably going to fold into some pencil first games in the future, or maybe even next year, where like I talk about Molerats in Space. Molerats in Space has this little packet in the box that says, it's got checks on the back of it and says every time you win, as a group, it's a cooperative game, cooperative shoots and ladders with rats, Molerats. Check it, and when all 3 boxes are checked, you can open this up and add it to the game. So it's not like Legacy, but it's this thing that comes in the box, which you get to after you've played some. It's like expansions that are incorporated into the visions and different ways to extend and expand. And I really think it's fun. It's great. It lightens up the game. It brings it through. And I think it's powerful. And that's what, so legacy is this huge category, but I think the idea of games that are evolving as you play and growing is fantastic and a huge trend. There's also been this sort of, in that way, that sort of tutorialized beginning of games. I have some mixed feelings on that. You take a game like Fog of Love. Fog of Love does a pretty impressive job of teaching you how to play through this embedded instruction experience. I think that's probably one of the better cases of it. You oftentimes look at legacy games, the more you play of them, and they're trying to do that too. I think it's a crutch at sometimes. Like, I think the longer I'm playing where I feel like I'm not playing the game, but I'm just playing like warm-up, I think that's problematic. But it is an interesting development and trend. A game that I really didn't like, and I'll review it because I like the game, but Fortress, which is the fast-forward Freedom Freeze thing, that Stronghold line. I haven't played the other ones, but for Fortress, like, it was awful. That's a game where you are like playing through the emerging rules, and you're playing through the rules, and you're playing through the rules, and it's like you just play a bunch of lame games, and then finally you're playing the good game. And then that's the game you always play. So it's like this staged rules. But the other thing is the game's gorgeous, but they put text, just garbage text on so many cards that would be fantastic without it. And it's like, couldn't you have just done the rule book? Give me the rule book, teach me how to play, let me play the final game, which is great. But why muddy the cards and make, like, sometimes you don't need to do something. But I'll get to that review when I get to it. So anyway, just this fantastic, fantastic space and games, and it's awesome. And I love the merging of game types and taking things from over here and pulling it together and collaborating in collaborative teams. Production value is also skyrocketing. And this you can attribute a lot to Kickstarter, right? But more and more, the production value of games, the quality of games, the quality of the components, the boxy inserts are being pushed up and up and up. Now, we'll come back to this because now that I'm going to move over in the industry space, that's problematic in a certain way. We'll talk about it, but certainly it is awesome. Components, component quality, imaginative, suggestive pieces and amazing meeples and miniatures and all these different things are like boxes are these big, huge, awesome experiences that you're picking up and playing, and it's fantastic. So moving on to some of the trends in the industry, obviously there's this huge disruption in the scene with Kickstarter, and a lot of that has to do with the ability to front load risk, right? Being able to get money up front for your products. But it's also about being able to find your specific audience in fun games, find your tribe, right? More and more, we're in a time where there's a game for everyone. Like if you're into this or that, you can find a game that's really focused on this or that. So the niche products are going. But with all of these new entrants that aren't sort of, like the industry was locked in the way things were, in the distribution channel, in the retail, in everything that's set it up, and that's completely crumbling. You can look at Cards Against Humanity as one of the forebears of this, but the changes in how games are funded, the changes in how the money is spent, and the changes in how it's then distributed and sold at retail or not, is going to have a lasting effect on the industry. So it is a challenge right now. That the traditional model is falling apart. The traditional model of shop, brick and mortar is changing. And this isn't a, people talk about distribution and the industry and people want to go to stores. That's all true. And I strongly believe in retail and the importance of it and what it does for the community and how big of a deal it is. It should be protected and it should be supported. But you're not paying attention if you think it isn't changing. This is not about board games. Amazon Prime, direct-to-consumer is changing the world right now. The number of things I get in this house that are dropped off at my door in a box, from food to batteries to is through the roof. The convenience of wanting something, clicking on it, and getting it at your door is changing. The money savings, the efficiencies, all these things are having a huge impact on retail, huge impact on major retail lines, whether you're talking about Barnes & Noble, Target, like Walmart. All these businesses are being impacted by it, including board games. And they all have had similar distribution channels. The board game space with Kickstarter and otherwise, it's accelerating because, that margin that feeds that system, MSRP, retailer gets it at 50% of MSRP, distributor gets it at 40% of MSRP. All that was feeding the system, but now through Kickstarter, now through online, now through community and direct marketing, publishers more often can sell direct. And you're seeing lots of weird and interesting things from that. You're seeing companies that are coming up and saying, we're just going to be direct to consumer. You're seeing companies that are saying, well, this is going to be a Kickstarter exclusive, or we're not going to retail with this. You're seeing really weird one, Walmart exclusive. Their first one is Fog of Love, which is an interesting choice. But Fog of Love is advertising on Board Game Geek constantly about that, and to buy it, and whether it's online or in stores. And so there are all these different companies trying to compete at retail, and it's the Wild West. But the reality is, more and more stuff is being bought and online and delivered. And so on the retailer side, that's a problem. That's their business is selling stuff in their stores, and many of them are selling online too. And so what it takes to do that is changing. I'm seeing awesome retailers coming up and stepping up to the challenge. Some on the bigger side are looking for exclusives and original content, and they're investing in the products that are getting into the stores. But others, the mom and pop stop, the friendly local game stores, are looking at ways to facilitate and provide other values. Look at Game Castle in Mountain View. One, they have a fantastic, I've donated a lot of games to it, but they have a really big board game library for people to try and play games. They have, the retail space is like 1/8 of the playing space. They're constantly doing events. They can rent out the back room for events. They run hosted role-playing nights with a mixture of role-playing and a role-playing adventure with miniature set pieces and objects. So it's sort of like a escape room role-playing, and all of this compelling experience and content that drives players or users or shoppers into their stores. In some cases, they'll buy. In some cases, they'll still buy online. But it's changing the relationship between the game store and GameSpot and game location and cafe with the end user or player or whatever you want to call this person, the people coming into the stores. And I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's going to be tough. I think retailers are going to struggle, and I think it's not going to be fair. But I do think what you're going to get is not only places where people gather, but where people gather and experience and create bonds, which I think in the board game industry is so powerful. This is a rambling video. It's not a bulleted list. So I think that's changing, and People are like, well, maybe in 5 or 10. It's changing faster and faster and faster. Faster and faster and faster. It's not like this year was a 10% change, next year is going to be a 15% change. This year was a 10% change, next year is going to be a 40% change. It's moving. Another thing that's happening is the wealth of content is growing and growing and growing, and the volume of the content, the quality of the content, just the sheer, all of it. And honestly, this isn't something new. This happens in a number of creative industries as people start making money, and it typically has some sort of collapse. You know, people want to say crash or bubble burst, but you just have a refolding of what's happening. Growth right now is so big that it's masking a lot of what's happening in the industry right now. A lot of the winners and losers are just getting carried by this giant wave. And it's a great wave. It will slow down at some point, and that's going to be when you really feel the consolidation. But the player impact is real. You know, it's when Atari went over before Nintendo came back in, or with iOS. I think iOS actually is a great example. It's 1,000 games a day, or whatever it is. There's so many games. You can't consume it. You can't see it. You don't know about it. So what happens? Well, a couple things happen. One, you have the price points rarely change. If anything, they go down. So you don't see a lot of price point changing. But to compete, people do a couple things. One, they increase quality, and we're seeing the quality go up. The crazy thing, though, is the way quality is going up and component, the companies that are doing the Kickstarter thing, direct to consumer, that are taking out margin that was going to the channel and feeding that margin into the quality of games are creating a real problem. Not a bad thing, but it's a real problem, because what that means is all the companies that are still in the normal chain, they can't compete because they can't spend that money and have their margins. So it's this disruptive force that ultimately forces more and more of an abandonment of the traditional model, because consumers just want what they're getting, and their expectations change. As the quality expectation in iOS goes up and up and up, there's less and less you can do about it. Games just have to be better graphics, better performant, longer, more features. It just pushes everything up. In the video game industry, tools and technology can mitigate that a little bit. If Unity upgrades so it makes it really easy to do character animation, rigging, and modeling, that makes it easier for smaller companies to have those features. It's a little harder in board games because it's manufacturing, right? And it's physical. It's not just digital tools. So you have this rising pressure of production quality and content hitting a wall, and one side of the equation is pulling margin from there for more profit or better quality, squeezing it more. It's a real thing. The other thing that happens, which is a conundrum, is there's this growing wealth of money, but it's you know, at the end of the day, each buyer only has a certain amount of money they're going to take out of their pocket, and so you have a flooded market, and visibility becomes a problem. So what happens when visibility becomes a problem? Well, you get spikier, shorter lifespans for your games. Your tails, you go from longer tails to shorter tails and more spiky. It becomes a consumption-driven business. It becomes something where the new hotness pushes out the old hotness faster and faster and faster. So games that would sell over time suddenly sell and then disappear. Sell and just disappear. That problem, that hit or miss, then creates channel problems where manufacturers don't want to print as many because they don't know what's going to happen and they don't want to be stuck with stock. It's this really interesting mix of the physical problems of retail with digital that you don't see in other types of games and mediums. You don't see in YouTube videos or in video games. It's really this manufactured good thing that becomes so hard. So one, that problem starts coming through, which is shorter, fickle audiences, shorter lifespans of projects, the hotness. Also, you see this thing where you then marketing, the cost per acquisition, the cost for an eyeball to see your game, to be at an event, to get covered, to run a successful Kickstarter. The budget, it becomes more and more expensive to compete. Again, iOS is a great example of this. To get visibility in iOS, to get user volume in iOS, the cost for install or click-through skyrockets, especially in the expensive, mid-core categories. So it's just more and more expensive to enter the market, to just be there. It's always important. There's always going to be the incredible story, the long shot, the David versus Goliath. There's always going to be the game that comes out that surprises everyone or hits the viral marketing, or like those are going to always happen. They always happen because lightning in a bottle and magic, that unexpected, we are wired to love that stuff. But in scale, there will be fewer and far between. You'll see them more, but you're not going to see the thousands and thousands of failures underneath them. So there's as many, it's just that there's more losers. So what ends up happening is you have more and more losers, bigger and bigger winners, and then you have the consolidation where the winners start grabbing and pulling in. It's happening in media with Disney buying Fox, right? Like all of this stuff is happening. And it's terrifying and exciting and amazing. You gotta roll with it, or you can get left holding the wrong bag, right? Or at the bus stop, or whatever analogy you want to use. So these are changes in the industry that, again, if you're a little person trying to get on Kickstarter for the first time, it's overwhelming. It feels like I saw everyone else do their game on Kickstarter, but like I can't get any attention, or I can't pay for all that art, or I don't, it's harder and harder. So, and even impact like the amount of individual companies in China and factories, and in factories in the United States and Europe, they want to get product. But whereas they were used to getting product from a small handful of companies, now it's dozens and dozens and dozens of companies. That just requires a very different amount of attention and a very different amount of management for the manufacturer than when they were just a handful. I use this analogy when developing video games. Sometimes when you're doing, like, you're juggling a lot of balls, you throw a bunch of balls in the air, or a bunch of features, doing a lot of new stuff, you invest in a lot of things, there's this bump that's going through the pipe. You're like, we're going to spend all this money. And then then there's development and QA and release and marketing and consumer. And what ends up happening is, as the bubble, or not the bubble, but I don't know if this was a python, animal, but the bulge that's rolling through here, as it hits each of those groups, it pops them, it expands them. So like, QA might not be feeling it now, but when all the features come through, they're going to be hurt. So each group feels that growth along the way, and we're just seeing tons of that right now, and different groups getting, manufacturers getting hit, and retailers getting hit, and everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. And if you think there were a lot of great, amazing games this year, there are going to be even more next year. Even more. Like, the amount of people, like, I signed these games. Right now, it's more, tons of stuff. People are pushing it through. Big companies, small companies. Some are focusing on key titles. That's great. But the volume of titles is not slowing down. The volume of titles isn't going to slow down until you have losers, right? So it's inevitable, right? It's inevitable. That doesn't mean everyone's going to lose. That doesn't mean we're not going to keep playing board games. It's just going to mean there's going to be a changes, reactions, resolutions, pushing through. Like, that's what industry does. The last thing that I want to talk about is how there's been this huge change in the board game community, and how the board game community has been communicating, growing, exchanging ideas in the last year, and many years leading up. But it's just a tidal wave, whirlwind, swirl of stuff going on now that's hugely contributing and having an impact on all these other factors, right? So on one hand, you have this huge growth of online communities where board gamers of different locations and types and ages can all interact together, in a hobby that was traditionally playing board games with the people in your in your house, your friends, or your neighborhood. So there's, whether it's Facebook groups, user groups, Board Game Geek forums, Reddit, Twitter communities, all of these places where gamers can interact, talk, discuss, think about, and engage gaming. It's taking this very non-digital thing and providing this huge opportunity for digital engagement, sharing photos, videos, right? There's this huge growth. I mean, YouTube's been huge, but just the huge range of anyone can have a camera and anyone can do a YouTube channel. Reviews, how to play, streaming, live streaming of games, like the, Twitch board game is getting really big. And Kickstarter Live and Facebook Live and all of this media and consumption that's happening around games. And it's super cool and it's super powerful. One of the things when you look at Kickstarter has been this huge success of the Kickstarter board game group, category. And some of that has to do with how disruptive Kickstarter is in particular to this industry, that everything I've spoken about with, digital, direct to consumer. But at the same time, it's also because there's been this huge swell of community around Kickstarters that's helped make creators better, help them have better content, help them have better videos, help them have, better pages. How do you get to distribution? How do you handle shipping? All of those things. And that's a really big deal. It's a really big deal. And that community and those groups are facilitating this huge growth in the industry. At the same time, you're having this online explosion. You're having this local explosion, right? There are so many conventions right now. So many conventions. You're just in a scenario where, you can play at home, the game stores are changing, the cafes are changing, there's cons most weekends in different areas, travel, all these board game conventions, and you're also getting these other groups in industry coming in. You have the PAX Unplugged, right? That was a big thing this year, especially because it was directly across from BGG.con, right? Like, you have these new folds of people coming in and engaging and growing the community and changing and expanding the community. And that's hugely powerful. And it has been so cool to see and be a part of that, to see it happening on all these different platforms, to see people engaging, all the fun that's being had. This is where it is about the joy, all the happiness that gaming is bringing right now. And, distraction from other things that are going on. But it's real, right? And that's a big deal. It's a big deal. One of the things that I think is important to recognize and understand is, as the audience is growing, we've talked about all that, there's this bit where you're bringing in all of these different groups of people and identities, and you see that on the creative side, what's coming in, but also you're bringing in, people who are with different skill sets. When you think about the board game community, sort of the core users, the people that have given us and brought us here, and I don't want to say this in the wrong way, right? But hey, you can assume they're people that are interested in certain, systems and mechanics and somewhat nerdy, right? That sort of core gamer group. There's always been other people, but that was the center for a long time. And as it's expanding, you have people coming in with other expertise and interests, whether that's sports or or movies or advertisement or whatever. And as these groups come in, they're bringing all these skill sets, and all these skill sets are changing the dynamic and how the industry is growing, and it's crazy. It really is a maturing audience, and again, there's winners and losers when that happens. It is an incredible time for gaming. It is awesome. It isn't without problems, and it isn't going to be without, again, people who find what they're used to changing and people who find what their livelihood was changing. And that sort of sucks, right? And that's why, as a group, we need to foster, engage, and help make this industry amazing, right? What is it, playing games, enjoying, sharing, teaching others how to play, recognizing creators, recognizing artists, recognizing designers, arteurs, if you like, but people who are making, being fans of publishers, thinking through and supporting both online communities, but also local communities, people playing at game stores, people playing at cons. That is part of how it will continue to not only grow as an industry, but grow into and become the industry that it has, and I would like to see it continue to be, right? Went a little bit all over the place in this video, for sure. I think that, I hope it was interesting. If it was a little all over the place, hopefully my Pencil First Games reflection on 2017, what's coming in 2018, is a little bit more like game. And if you have any comments, thoughts, perspectives, I missed something, I got something wrong, I got something right, you want to check, it's a really interesting time in discussion, and I really look forward to engaging it with people. And I wanted to, at least, albeit long-winded, albeit rambling, give my perspective. And I know, not so much, it's going to be, I'm used to the people who watch this kind of video, but, maybe we look back and say, was any of that right? Was any of that wrong? So, this is such a cool time, such a cool place, so much fun to be had, so many people working so hard creating, and so much, everyone's a part of it, whether they're designers, publishers, artists, creators, content creators, Kickstarter creators, retailers, distributors, players, manufacturers, I missed more. It's all part of it. We're all together working and hopefully making the best industry possible. Okay? Thanks. Bye. Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.